Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North, and in this video I'd like to give you guys an update on my orchid collection again. So this year hasn't been quite as good a year for flowering as the previous years. It might be to do with the weather conditions, but I reckon the main thing is I haven't actually been feeding my orchids as much. I've been very busy this year with work and that, so I haven't been able to feed them quite as regularly as I would normally. But they're still doing quite well. I mean, Phalaenopsis orchids thrive on neglect quite often, so it's still a good display. And I'll just run you through how my orchids are doing and how each one has done this year. So I'll start off with the smallest one. This is one that I've featured in the previous video. It's a very small miniature Phalaenopsis orchid, and it has flowered once for me, but it was sitting in sphagnum moss. Its roots went rotten, so I had to transplant it into better medium using bark and perlite. This has struggled a lot because all its roots rotted off, and since then it hasn't put a lot more leaf on, but it has grown plenty of roots. You can see its roots are now nicely inside the growing medium. It's filling the pot quite well, and in fact this is the pot it came with, but I think it probably needs a larger pot. It really does look quite crammed already. It's coming out the bottom, some of them are kind of pushed up out the side. What's happened is I planted it in straight, but because the roots have been growing down, the roots have actually pushed, and the roots growing down have conversely pushed the plant up, so that's why it's on its side. But as you can see, it is fully secured in the pot. There's no worry about it falling out now, so I'm just kind of going to have to leave it at kind of an angle like that. But it's slowly getting there. I think it'll still be another year till it flowers, but now that the roots have established, it should put on a lot of leaf growth soon, and it'll flower by next year, I reckon. So my other one, which isn't flowering at the moment, is my small pink one. It's got small pink and white flowers. This one actually looks very similar to this one back here, but just much smaller flowers. It did have quite a good display, and because of that we had it in the living room for a while, but because the living room doesn't have quite as much light where it was positioned, so it's kind of gone over now. You can see that this is the old flower stalk, so what I need to do is cut it off towards the bottom, and that will encourage the second spike to come up. I'll also put this in a sunnier position. So there are the two that aren't flowering, but the other three are flowering quite nicely. The white one here is just starting to come into flower. This one always seems to have the nicest, shiniest leaves. As you can see, they're always a very shiny leaf, especially the younger leaves. All I do is wipe it with a tissue, that's all, and it comes up nice and shiny. You can see this is a pure white orchid. It's just starting to come into bloom now. I'll get you a nice close-up of the detail on the inside there. So yeah, as I say, it's just starting to come into bloom now. I haven't fully trained it. It's kind of in a spiral at the moment. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. My favourite type is where it comes out and it slowly curves down. I think that's the nicest kind of display. As I say, normally I do try and train them to make them have a really nice shape, but I've been a bit busy this year, so I haven't been able to train all these flower spikes. But this one's always a really healthy one, and this is also the one with the healthiest roots. As you can see, loads of healthy green roots. It's always a happy orchid, this one. It doesn't flower the best, but it's always probably the healthiest of all my orchids. So the best flowering one is this large purple one here. You can see it's looking really good. I think I counted 18 blooms on it at the moment. I think its record was something like 24, and I'll show you a picture now of what that looked like. That was on a single flower stem, so that it looked a lot more magnificent, and it really looked quite nice. So as you saw, that's what I did last year, just one flower stem. This year it divided its flowers onto the two stems, but it still looks nice, but the individual stems are obviously shorter because of that, but it does still have plenty of flowers. And I think it's at its peak now. Looking at the end of the flower stalk, you can see there's no more active growth, so that's probably going to be the most flowers it's going to get. These ones have just opened just literally the other day. You can see that that one's still upside down. It hasn't twisted the correct way around yet, but it's looking really good. I always quite like this one. It looks quite dark in the video, but in real life it's a bit more of a pinky purple. For some reason, I don't know why, but in the video it's coming across as more of a dark purpley mauve kind of colour, but it's definitely got quite a bit of pink in there as well. The leaves on this one are always really large, but this year they're not done as well. So I think because I haven't fed it enough, a bit of a nitrogen deficiency, some of the leaves are starting to go yellow. And it's also starting to get quite high in the pot, so I may need to do some repotting in a year or two. But otherwise it's doing really well, that one. It's always a good flower for me. It's probably one of my favourites out of all my orchids. This one here has also done well this year. This was actually a reject one from a from a garden centre, sorry. It had pretty much died, and it was only 10 pence. I thought, oh, it's only 10 pence. I might as well buy it, I'm not going to lose anything. It came back for me. It's flowered probably this is the third time, And when I did first buy it, it actually lost all its leaves, but as you can see, it's got 2 healthy leaves at the moment. It did have 4 leaves just last week, but with all the energy going into the flower stem, the orchids often lose a couple of the lower leaves whilst that happens, so it's not an issue. Plus these are quite healthy leaves, and as you can see, it's just starting to go back into a growth phase, so that means these flowers are going to finish quite soon. As I said before, this one has just come to its peak now. This probably reached its peak about a month ago. The flowers have been like this for a month, but you can see there's already the sign, there's a bit of veining starting to appear. That's the sign that these are going to go over soon. But these have had a really good display for a good month or two, and it'll probably be another month until they're completely finished, so I'm quite happy with it. But as you can see, it's got a good number of flowers. It's got quite a good selection on it. This is one that is split into 2 stems. So you can see the one stem came up and then it had a branch on it and it's split into 2. But it looks quite nice. I mean, if I was to train it, I probably would have pulled this one a bit further down just so that you can see the ones behind a bit easier instead of covering it like that. But I still think it looks quite nice as it is. You can see there more the shape I would have preferred. But as I say, I didn't train it this year. So the last orchid I'm going to show you is not a Phalaenopsis orchid, it's my Dendrobium orchid. And I'll show you it's a bit strange what it's doing this time. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess at the moment, but that's because I've just let it grow by itself and I haven't tied it up, so I need to tie it up in this video. So this should be in its growth phase at the moment. It had a really good flowering in spring, it looked really nice, and then it started to go into growth phase. It started to grow this new stem here, and also this new stem down there. It was growing away quite happily, and then about a month ago it suddenly just started developing all these side shoots on the side here. As you can see, they've all turned into flowers, so I'm getting a second flush of flowers, which I wasn't expecting. When I did have the first set of flowers, the main stems that were flowering was these 3 here. And I thought it was a bit strange that the other ones didn't flower. I thought maybe they weren't mature enough. But for whatever reason, they've decided to flower now. So as you can see, this one here is absolutely covered in flowers already. This one's got a few that are open, but as you see here and here, there's lots and lots of buds on the way. Same with this one here, even though it flowered last year. There's a lot of buds coming on the sections that didn't flower last year at the very top. And this spike over here is also going to be covered in flowers. As you can see, there's lots of flower buds, and each bud will probably have about 3 up to 4 flowers. But there is one strange bud which is further down here. And for whatever reason, it's kind of a weird hybrid between a flower and a growing stem. There's a flower bud there, got some leaves on it. So I'm not sure what's to do with that one. I may cut it off because it's above the ground level. And normally if stems come out with leaves above the ground level, I cut them off to encourage a bushier plant, because if it starts growing leaves, if it starts growing a shoot with leaves higher up, it'll grow roots from there, and that's really difficult to put into the growing medium unless you're going to cut it off and make a new plant from it. So this at the moment needs a bit of tying in, so I've got a few canes here already, just tying up some of them. So I'll just go around now tying up the remaining ones, but also making sure that they kind of separated just enough that I can still have a nice display of flowers. Because although if I could tie them all up like this, but that would, one, cover them a bit from the light so they wouldn't be getting a lot of sunshine, but also I'd like to be able to see the flowers more clearly as well. So there we are, that's it tied up much more neatly now. I'll also possibly give this one a tie later on as it gets taller, but at the moment it doesn't need any support. So there you are, you can see it's much easier to see the flowers, they're nicely distributed. This one here might be covering the back of this one slightly, but this doesn't have any flower buds until this height and above. This on the left here is going to be covered in flowers soon, as is the lower section of this one at the front. As you can see, there's many shoots coming on it. And then these two here, as you can see, they're already flowering. They don't have any more buds coming apart from this single bud at the back there. So it should be quite a good distribution of flowers, and it'll look quite nice when it comes into flower. Now, because it's flowering so well now, I don't think it's going to flower quite as well next year, because it's only got 2 new shoots coming on the way. And once a flower stem flowers, it can't flower again unless it does what this one did last year, which is kind of like a half flower, where basically half the nodes flower, the other half don't flower. Once a node has turned into a flower or a new stem, it can't flower again. So these will, unless it puts up a lot of new stems soon, it's not going to have the greatest flowering, but it's looking quite good at the moment. I will have to cut off some of these older stems eventually. You can see there's a few further down here which have been cut off in the past. At the moment there's no need to cut them off because they're actually providing energy for the new growth and the flowers. The stems are actually known as pseudo bulbs because they're quite fat and they are a type of bulb almost, as they're a swollen stem, and they store a lot of water and a lot of nutrients as energy. Nutrients and energy, so that it can provide more growth for the new growth and also for the flowers. So what's going to happen is after this is finished flowering, normally you would put it into a growth phase, but because it's coming into winter, I'm not sure if it is going to go into a growth phase. It's really a dormant phase in winter normally where it puts its flowers on. So we'll see what happens. If it does go into a growth phase, I'll give it plenty of light and heat and see what it does. But to be honest, as it's in the flowering phase now, I might just try and draw out this flowering phase for as long as possible, and then come spring trying to get it back into a growth phase again to get some good stems growing on it. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment. There's a lot of stems, so I'm going to have to cut some of these off eventually. But for now, until they shrivel up a bit more and put more of their energy into the new stems, I'm just going to leave them as they are. So that's it for my orchid collection. I think that's all the orchids I have at the moment. Most of them are flowering quite well, with a few just starting and a few still in their dormant phase because they just finished flowering. But hopefully I'll give you guys an update in a few months' time, maybe when this one's in its full flowering stage, and also when this white one here has opened up all its flowers. This should be quite a good flowering on this one. It's still growing fairly vigorously, and also the leaves are quite a size, there's plenty of leaves, so it should put on quite a number of flowers. But as I say, this one never seems to flower quite as well as my other orchids. For some reason it never seems to get much more than 10 flowers on it. It doesn't get up to 24 like my best one has. So that's it for now for my orchids, and I'll give you an update in a few months' time.